Never in a month of Sundays will they ever admit as to how much money they make from the sale of whiskey due exclusively to our contribution and content, which makes it all the worse when you go up to some status individual in the so-called, in the industry, and they patronize you with what's essentially a fake representative sample of some bling juice. How dare they?
True.
How dare they?
Hey, welcome to Super Social Club. I'm Jeremy.
This is Whisky Rant. I'm Rob.
Welcome to the Whisky Rant Podcast.
It's a little crusty.
It's frustrating.
And it's going to be a little bit of a rant.
I don't understand it. I don't know why.
Some sort of injustice.
Anyway, end rant.
I visited Shell at a point, in 2011, I think it was. That's in Victoria Island.
Mm-hmm.
They're just
Vancouver
getting started
Island,
at that time, yeah.
Vancouver Island.
They're new.
And originally they were making Victoria gin.
Yeah.
And it's a way back, way up the road, about 2 hours drive up from Victoria. And they just had the day off at the end of the festival, and they said, Ralfy, the guy's quite interested if he'll pick you up. And I thought, well, if he's going to put himself out like that, let's visit the distillery. And I was hugely impressed, and I know that they've expanded and grown and developed because Canadian whiskey is expanding and growing and developing. People are talking about when is the next single cask or high strength version of Lot 40 going to appear? When will it happen? And of course, the old dogma is that, no, there's no interest in these single casks and therefore we don't produce it. Yeah, sure there's not.
The distilleries that are single malt driven, so like your Macalonis, your Two Brewers, your Shelter Points, versus the traditional old school, Wisers, which is the conglomerate that encompasses Lot 40 and Gooderham and Worts. Then you have Crown Royal, who probably has ridiculous liquid in that factory, warehouse, but
They won't sell it.
they won't sell it to anybody but the US.
And that would be the best to take something that Crown Royal has and bottle it with integrity, like integrity bottling.
Yeah.
Because they don't do it really. I mean, like, not that we see
Not at
anyway.
all.
Like, they have a couple interesting things to go down to the US, but like we don't see that. And
Because it's Diageo.
it's Diageo, yeah. You're right. It's Diageo.
And there you have it. So you know the lie of the land. You know the way things are going tomorrow. There will be more small Canadian distilleries, without doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what relationship you have with Glenora Distillery over in Nova Scotia. I know it's a long, it's quite a distance for you because Canada is such an enormous country.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the globalization of whiskey is moving beyond Scotland, without a doubt. There's a lot of curiosity. Gone are the specific brand loyal customers who would open their bottle of whiskey and finish it within a couple of days, if not sooner, and then go out for a month later, a week later, and buy another of exactly the same bottle. We're now in a moment in time where people, enthusiasts, whiskey geeks, have a room set aside in their house with probably about 30 to 50 bottles open at any one time.
Yep.
And they're not alcoholics. They're not there to get pished. They're basically really tuning in at the most phenomenal time in human history to the availability of affordable, incredible smells, tastes, and sensations, far beyond anything that you'll encounter in foodstuffs.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the property of alcohol. Alcohol locks up an incredible caliber of flavor diversity. And not only that, the brain really knows how to process it. It surprised me that when I opened a bottle of Glenbretton 10-year-old, so it's the same age, same whiskey, essentially. 14 years later, I recognized it immediately. Not superficially, but the actual complexity of the signature. And I can see how it's improved. They've reduced the alcohol yields. They've improved the grain yield, the flavor yield. The delivery is cleaner, fresher. They're using great casks. The actual experience that the people working at this distillery are showing all these years later manifests itself literally in the first pour.
Wow.
I mean, I've got to hand it that distillery. They're selling 25-year-old whiskey now because they've survived the situation thrown at them by the Scotch Whisky Association.
Yeah.
They've survived, not just survived it, but they've stood their ground. And I know they're under new ownership. I'm aware of that. But it would have been an absolute tragedy that people were not aware of such fantastic little distilleries simply because they're not in Scotland itself.
I do wish we had a better relationship with Glenora. I think I should reach out to the new ownership. Earlier, we were in talks of, I was just trying to actually purchase a few bottles from them because a lot of their stuff they keep distillery only. So it's very hard to get their stuff here. The way regulations work in Ontario, it's just a nightmare. But they do have some very intriguing things, and they're using casks that I believe all Canadian companies should be using, which is ice wine casks, because that's something that we have in excess because we produce it here.
Absolutely. And you've said it yourself. This is part of the authenticity and uniqueness of Canadian whiskey. And yet, if you're in Scotland and you talk about how great Canadian whiskey is, if you're selective about what you buy, then they'll come back with but they put orange juice in their whiskey. This is the 11% rule. And
9.09,
9.09. Thank you very much. This 9.09% rule, that should never even exist.
It has to go. It has to go.
The stipulation is you can't use it in single malt if you're going to call it single malt.
Is that really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can't use it in single malt if you're going to call it single malt.
At least there's that. So
Canadian whiskey as a category, unfortunately, they have to just come up with something better.
Yeah.
They have to just, it's unacceptable in this day and age that
we were at Toronto, Spirit of Toronto, which I think is that's the one that you went to a long time ago, Spirit of Toronto.
Yeah.
And we were talking with who's the there, and he fed us like a media sample of like the next
which was phenomenal,
which was so good and just did not live up to what they actually bottled.
It wasn't close.
I'm like, why are you pouring specifically us, because he knew who we were,
single
like
cask,
a media sample of some honey barrel that is like not going into this blend. And it's just like, it just came off the wrong way, I think. And it left such a sour taste in my mouth anyway.
He's dramatically changed. And it's really unfortunate because the moment he started signing bottles, like his signature was worth something. It was the moment that I realized that I can't buy this product.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Like, I can't look forward to this product anymore. I'll still buy it. Like their standard Coke actually is a 48% expression, which is very good. And it's just double cask. That's the only difference between that and the standard. It's double cask.
Just to reassure you, by the way, what you're experiencing there is, frankly, the industry behaving in an unprofessional and very condescending manner, to be feeding you these honey samples
Yeah.
Right. These leading samples, tapping into the suggestibility that you naturally anticipate that when you go out to buy a bottle, the quality of what you're sampling there should be in that bottle, and it's not. And this isn't an isolated situation.
You're right.
I have experienced exactly the same thing with a Scotch single malt whiskey distillery. I was at the distillery. They gave me a sample. They said, this is going to be our such and such a year old. And I took a nose and I took a taste and I said, this is absolutely amazing. I'm really surprised that you're getting this quality at that age. But when it came round to me buying a bottle, which I did, I opened it, and it was nothing like the honey sample that I had been given. And what happened there, something very simple, I had been willfully defrauded with information. Just like you, frankly, in my opinion, have been willfully defrauded by an orthodox marketing trick. And they should be ashamed of themselves.
I agree. That's
Absolutely
happened twice to
ashamed of
us.
them.
That's happened with and that's happened with as well. Remember that sample they sent us of what was supposed to be the first cask strength?
Yes.
It was, Ralfy, I kid you not, it was all apricot sauce.
Yeah.
It was the most incredible rye that I've ever tried in my life.
Yeah.
And then when it became an actual bottling, it was a shadow
of itself.
Yeah, not even like it was not even close.
But I'm going to share my tactics with you here. The next time I'm ever in a position where a distillery and I'm visiting or at a trade or a whiskey festival or whatever, pour me a glass of anything and say, this is what we're about to bottle. What do you think? And I'll say, oh, this is lovely. This is fantastic stuff. Now tell me, what will you actually be bottling?
Yeah, right.
You're right.
Let's see how they respond.
It's unfortunate, but we only, as human beings, learn from our mistakes. And you need someone to pull the wool over your eyes in order to realize that you need to be asking those questions, right? Like that.
It's not only that. See, when they pull your wool over our eyes with one thing, what they're saying is they will pull the wool over our eyes with everything.
You're right. I'm part of a band that just wrote a song called "Lying is Self-Preservation," and that's the industry in a nutshell. They do it to preserve their right to be there, to be relevant, to be part of something that, you know what, they're not delivering when it comes to like the global scale.
It is what it is. I'm always reticent to use such direct language as lying. I would call it them being economical with the truth.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing is, it's just as impactful a phrase and point of reference. There is definitely a culture within all whiskey industries where people in certain positions look down their noses at the enthusiasts and actually fail to realize and acknowledge just how influential collectively the enthusiasts are, not just now, but in the future, as to they will vote, enthusiasts will vote with their feet and vote with the money in their wallets. And we could be discussing for another hour the situations we've witnessed within our respective whiskey industries, where arrogant, entitled, conceited, ignorant, small-minded, overly narrowly focused representatives have given us a virtual pat in the head
Mm-hmm.
and told us we're such good little fellows for being enthusiasts and not to bother them with difficult questions, but just to stand there and worship them as they sign yet another bottle, which no doubt the flippers will start flipping. And if they don't, they might well put a bottle in themselves and make sure they do their own flipping.
I'm sure they do. You know, it's funny because meeting Richard Urquhart from Gordon MacPhail, Ben Romick, and then meeting from doesn't own a piece of that conglomerate. He's the master distiller.
Right.
Richard Urquhart, that's his family.
Yeah.
Like if anyone out of the two, deserves not the right word, but you would expect to be a little bit cocky and arrogant, it would be probably Richard. Yet he's been nothing but kind, generous, humble.
I agree.
Never signed the bottle, never said, hey, you need, you know, this is,
Right.
you know, nothing of that sort. Whereas he feels like he's a rock star.
And he thinks he could just get away with it too. He's like, oh yeah, these guys will post about, you know, how good this new is on their social media.
Yeah.
And we'll sell a whole bunch.
Right.
It's like, no. We can tell the difference between what you poured us and what we bought at the store.
Right. Some advice here, chaps. 1, don't take it too personally. And 2, never give the oxygen of publicity to people in the industry who are not necessarily showing you the respect you feel you deserve as enthusiasts and human beings.
Yeah.
Right. Depersonalize it as much as you can. It is very, very rare that I will mention individual names on my channel. In fact, I've done it once in the last 3 years in a negative context, but it was a specific factual negative context. And I elaborated on the context in which I made that comment. And I know fine well that comment got back to the person whom it was about, and they weren't too pleased about it. Well, so sad, too bad, never mind.
Yeah.
It's delivered in context. What we've got to watch is that we don't end up like fashion channels, sports channels, or martial arts channels, or bodybuilding or fitness channels, and get involved, caught up in just unconstructive negativity.
Right.
Right. We should never feed that. And I tell you, you're going to love this. In all of us, 2 wolves reside: the good wolf and the bad wolf.
The one you feed.
The one you feed is the one that wins.
That's right. I love that line.
I've heard this before.
That's, I mean, so part of Sixer Kickboxing, we've always had a wolf represent like our logo, and I've probably said something along the lines of that quote, paraphrased, dozens of times over the last few years. Yeah,
Really good.
It's really good that we live in an age where, purely due to technology, we have these phenomenal opportunities to manifest our own little hobbies into something so much more. Because for the 3 of us, where would we be if the internet didn't exist?
I'd be a school teacher. I'd be a school teacher. That's pretty much it.
I would have more money in my pocket, probably.
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah, you might have more money in your pocket, Jeremy, but what about the value of that money, the transferable value into the unique experiences that you've enjoyed over the years, having consumed some fabulous stuff?
I wouldn't have this experience. That's for sure.
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have this luxury, I gotta call it,
Yeah.
because you know,
It
3
is a
years
luxury,
in a
guys.
row you've spoiled us, Ralfy. We really, really appreciate it, because we know how limited this opportunity is, because you don't do this very
And
often.
we were with you when you were doing reviews in your house. I mean, like that's when I started getting into whiskey,
Yeah.
right? Like
Uh-huh.
that, that Glen Breton review was I remember watching that. I remember
watching that.
I know
as
I
well.
remember the cabinet behind you. I remember you like pressing play and then walking around and sitting down. Like I remember that stuff.
I remember ignorantly like requesting bottles to be
right?
reviewed.
Like
Just,
and the
like,
knowledge that
Yeah.
we have absorbed just from your videos you can't replace that. And like you can pay for it, but it's going to cost you a lot of money and you won't get the same result.
it takes, but look how many years. I mean, this is my 8th year. It's going to be doing Whiskey in the Six.
Yeah.
Look how many years it takes of experience to like get anywhere close to that kind of knowledge that you were providing people from day one.
And I think people like seeing the passion, right? Like they like seeing your passion because they're passionate, you're passionate. And it's like that connection, I think, that really kind of leads to just like online whiskey reviews and any reviews, really like stuff that you're interested in. It's really worth the time of consuming, I would say.
It's something that I really noticed after I'd finished writing my first book, Search for a Whiskey Bothy, in which basically an autobiography of my first experience with alcohol as a 4-year-old, raiding my dad's drink cabinet and taking a liking for Kahlua. But there was something about that moment that's never, ever left me. It's almost as if the fates had decided, listen, sonny boy, this experience, sneaking into the guest's room of your house, unlocking the cabinet of curiosities and having tiny tastes from each of these bottles, someday that's going to be useful to you. And then the kind of progress to going into a local bar in Glasgow, and it just so happens to be that most of the folk there work in the whiskey industry, whether they're cleaners or working in an office or doing tours or driving lorries. And of course, I met a cooper there. And of course, then they give me these wee samples to give her out cash because they get holiday money, because that's what you did in these days back in the 1980s. And it's been a phenomenal journey, but importantly, the opportunity to share it, to share that journey. It means that other people coming after me and coming after you have this archive online, wherever they are in the world, that all they need to do is want to access it, and they can access it, and they will learn and discover about spirits at 5 times the speed that we have. And some of these people will be working in the whiskey industry, and they'll get up to quite senior positions in the whiskey industry. And we've been part of their journey. They become part of our journey. And it's the technology which has been the one critical thing that changes it all. And see, with my 3 books, they're all self-published, right? And what I did was I tried a few book agents, food and drinks, I got a couple of replies. Nobody was interested. Clearly the wrong sort. Not the right. Doesn't have a degree in English literature.
Right.
Doesn't move in their certain literary circles to justify having a contract. They did me a favour. And it's Amazon that did it. Amazon are behind this, huge behemoth. But they literally let you write your book on your computer, you hire an editor online, you hire a book cover designer online, and then you upload the files, and then literally it's print on demand.
Okay, so by order.
And
Yeah. That's the best way
And
to
what
do it.
happens is suddenly you're your own publishing company.
Yeah.
It's such a interesting position to be in, because inevitably over time, as orthodoxy diminishes, what we're doing individually and collectively is going to become more significant and more impactful. The industry, by the way, whether it's in Canada or in Scotland, never in a month of Sundays will they ever admit as to how much money they make from the sale of whiskey due exclusively to our contribution and content, which makes it all the worse when you go up to some status individual in the so-called, in the industry, and they patronize you with what's essentially a fake representative sample of some bling juice. How dare they?
True.
How dare they?
Yeah.
You know, forgive it, but never forget it.
That's right.
Never, ever forget it. And next time you see them, give them a wave, give them a wink, and walk right past them.
That's right. You're right. You know, I had goosebumps when you were speaking, Ralfy, because I did the same thing as a kid. I used to sneak into my parents' liquor cabinet, take a swig of Bailey's Irish Cream or Kahlua or, you know, peach schnapps. And then as I got older, my mom always said, out of the four, because I have three brothers, out of the four of us, I always had to have a sip of her drink wherever we were. You know, it's funny how
acquire the taste quite early,
right? And my daughter does that. My son hates it.
Right.
My son will not take a sip of a beer or a whiskey, but anything I'm drinking, my daughter has to have a sip of. So I'm wondering, maybe she'll be the next Whiskey in the Six host at some point.
Who knows? It surprises me how poorly the industry has presented themselves directly on the internet. Obviously, I'm speaking from the perspective of Scotch whisky, but their denialism as to how the internet is responsible for the future of their business is extraordinary. Nobody's reading magazines now these days. Full of adverts.
Yeah.
And the adverts all look the same boring, dreary, sanitized narrative. And they come out with their initiatives. Oh, you know, we're going to issue our next whiskey as a non-fungible token. What a flatline disaster that's been. Who on earth would even want to admit they owned a Bored Ape these days, let alone an Ardbeg that had been an NFT? You know, it's
so true.
And the professionals, these highly paid professionals, you look at their content on Instagram, and heaven help us, TikTok now and again. And it's so yawn-inducing. It is such a dull narrative. I'm delighted they're there, by the way, because they actually make me look interesting after 1,000 reviews. And I'm delighted. All I have to do is just sit in the bothy, light the candle. This one's gone out now, it's burned out. Just light the candle. 3, 2, 1, right? Hello, multi, whatever. So we're up and running, and just straight to camera, bloopers and all. And the thing is, no, see when you're doing a review every single week, if there's no editing involved or minimal editing, it makes it so much easier, because editing, no matter how experienced you are, is enormously time consuming.
Yeah.
I know.
Horrendously.
That's Jeremy's department, unfortunately, for the Whiskey Rant. But I gotta say, we don't we don't have many bloopers when we're doing the whiskey rant. I have way more when I'm doing my own little.
That's true. When we're just like shooting the shit back and forth, it seems to flow a lot better than trying to articulate words by yourself.
When I'm just sitting in front of a camera trying to do a review, I find I'm stumbling for words. I'll say weird things.
Yeah.
I should actually like come up with a blooper reel of just all the stupidity that comes out of my mouth.
Bloopers are fine because it's natural. It's real. Even getting your facts wrong now and again, there's nothing wrong with that, because it's better to honestly get your facts wrong than to deliver facts that you've been fed by some representative,
Right.
which are in fact untrue or misdirectional.
Yep.
And this is why it really helps. The more we keep our distance from the orthodoxy, the better it is. You know, the whiskey tube is growing. The Oswas are growing. Canadian whiskey's growing. American whiskey's exploding. Scotch whiskey is most certainly growing. Global whiskey is growing. We can see where our audience is coming from around the world. All the surge of interest from India, because, well, you know, if you're going to review an Indian whiskey, they genuinely appreciate it. And I generally appreciate reviewing. I reviewed Indri. I'll be reviewing Rampur shortly, because it's genuinely, in its own right, a great whiskey that has the form of a rum, right? Because it's hot climate whiskey. And it's got its own signature. It's got its own sensation, mixes, combinations, and flavor range. And you get the rose apple, you get the rose otto, you get these kind of green vegetal notes in it. It's just fascinating. And you asked earlier, Jeremy, what keeps you going after 1,000 reviews? And it's just the fact that there's so many bottles out there to keep us all going, right? Should we be interested? And I doubt that any of us are going to hang up our socks anytime soon and become teetotal. And I doubt any of us are going to experience serious alcohol problems, because if we were, it would have happened by now, because
Absolutely.
we are surrounded by the best of the best.
Yeah, I mean,
That's your cold what's it, cold open?
the cold
or
open.
soft
I was going to
up?
ask you what we should use for the cold
That's a
open.
cold open right there.
Yeah, I mean, we're with you. Like, you
I'm just
know,
gonna-
moderation is great. But there's nights where you just don't want to drink anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
You're right. Like it is a privilege not to be an alcoholic, because I mean, to think how much waste you would have with your collection of whiskey when you drink it, not for enjoyment, is like it's not conceivable to me. You know,
It would be a horrendous waste. And there's also another unique feature about whiskey that we tend to kind of overlook. And the fact is, so long as we look after it carefully, it's got an indefinite shelf life.
Yeah.
There's no bottle of whiskey comes with an expiry date on it.
Right.
Never has.
No.
And this year I finished off a bottle of Lafroig, which opened 12 years ago.
Yeah. Still good, I'm sure.
It changed slightly, but it was absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
And now and again, if I have not such a great whiskey and I don't want to hold on to it, I'll just do a swapsy. I'll swap half a bottle of whiskey for a big bundle of firewood.
There you go.
Ever since
tops.
Yeah, ever since we've been recording songs, I've been singing. I've had to really nurse my voice, because I find alcohol really, like, you can hear it now. It's kind of like a groggy, almost raspy voice now. And when I
never stopped Janis Joplin, did it?
It's just rock and roll, man. That's just rock and roll.
You know what? It's
Get
the
over it.
singing that's caused it. It's the singing that's caused it, but the alcohol enhances it.
It
So
doesn't repair your voice, that's for sure.
that's for sure. And then when you add in a cigar or two every once in a while, and then the Ontario forest fires that were happening in the summer and all that other stuff.
Oh, that's right. That air quality, the air quality, that's the real killer. It's not
$62 Canadian right here, Ralph.
it's not the cigar, it's the air quality that's gonna get you.
Sorry, how much?
$62 Canadian.
Oh, for goodness sake. You can't even buy that in the UK for that money.
It was on sale at the LCBO, believe it or not.
The LCBO, you bought this?
30% off.
They don't even have
What?
sales
Are
like
they going
that.
soft?
Yeah,
I know, right? So
it was a mistake. I'm
it was
sure
it was that.
it was a
and this
mistake.
also 30% off.
It was a mistake.
This the Glen Rothis Maker's Cut or whatever it's called.
Very nice.
So 30% off. This is Paulo's bottle. That one's mine.
What is that Glen Rothis?
This is
What's the Maker's Cut? What is
the
it?
Maker's Cut is like a blend of like 10 to almost 20-year-old stuff, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
It's not cast strength, though, is it?
It's 48%.
48?
48,
Okay.
yeah. Unchill filter, no out of color, all that fun stuff. I think, if I'm not mistaken. This one here was $62.
Is this a brand new Peat Monster?
This is the 2022.
This is more mild than the other previous ones.
You could just smell it. So Lafroig heavy.
It's not as grungy as it used to be, in my opinion. Maybe because I've had a lot of that cast strength Aaron, but
It's the toothpaste peat.
this is Kalila heavy.
You think this is Kalila heavy?
Yeah,
I feel like, okay, maybe you're right.
this is Kalila heavy.
You could be right, actually. That does taste a little bit like Kalila. The finish.
It's nice
You
though.
want my opinion?
Yeah,
You
Absolutely.
want me to make the decision? Being the
yeah. Go
third,
ahead.
third party here,
Yeah.
Kalila.
Kalila. Yeah. I think you might be
But
right.
when is a Kalila not a Kalila? When the Kalila's been matured in a Lafroig cask, it happens. It happens.
I believe it.
Yeah, like
They are very similar. I mean, they're probably the most similar when it comes to Isla whiskeys.
like when in doubt, if you're drinking a peated blended malt,
You think it's Kalila
because like it has to be Kalila.
because Diageo
Kalila
giving it away.
Kalila just they just make enough to put it in all these blends.
Yeah, I mean, Lafroig gives out a lot as well, I think, and I do believe that Compass Box has a lot of Lafroig. I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, let's find out right now. I'm pretty sure that this has both, but you might be right. It's probably predominantly Kalila.
What else do they put in this? They put some other kind of cool stuff in here, right?
Yeah,
When blending, when you're doing your own blending, you find that a little bit of Lafroig added to another bottle will show itself up very, very quickly because it is so specific.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Such a particular flavor profile. It's when you're blending using Lafroig, you've got to use the absolute a lot less than you think you need.
You're probably that's definitely true. And you're right though. Compass Box uses so much Kalila.
They use a lot of Kalila, a lot of
it's
Klein
almost
Niche.
50% Kalila. It's 46% Kalila. No, it's more than that. It's 50% Kalila. No, it's pretty much. It's 35% Lafroig. It's
Okay.
35% Lafroig, and the rest is Kalila. No, there's 1% Highland malt in there.
Right. Yeah.
So, but the Lafroig is the youngest of the batch. It's 1, 2, 3,
For
4,
$65,
5,
you
6,
can't go
7-year-old
wrong with this. This is really nice.
7-year-old Lafroig. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. This is really nice. It's very clean. It's like
10-year-old Kalila is the majority of this.
yeah.
10-year-old Kalila.
Mhm.
Have you? I didn't know this, but if you look at the rings, I don't know if it's gonna focus.
Yeah, I can see them. Yeah.
Yeah, if you count the rings, how far they go up, it tells you how old they are.
Oh, like each ring is a year?
Yeah, each ring, like a kind of like a tree,
That's cool. I like that.
right? Like
Exactly where they got the inspiration.
yeah,
Each ring in a tree is a year of growth.
that's right. Yeah, so I guess that's where they got that idea.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why I just made that connection right now, but
Yeah, you think we should have realized that before?
you would think,
had
yeah.
enough compass box to figure it out. Yeah.
If I would have presented that in front of my students, they'd be like, "Oh, I get this. It's because the ring's on a tree." But you know, when you're old,
Sometimes you need an 8-year-old to figure it out.
It's true. Are you smarter than a 5th grader?
So, Ralfy, does that still stack up to today's Springbanks, or is it way different than anything else you're getting?
I'm not one for harshly judging the changes in a distillery's profile over the years when they're doing their level best to source decent casks.
Right.
Inevitably, whiskey does change.
Of course.
What's important is not the change in quality, but the change in signature and character, so long as the quality is there. If a distillery focuses on that, you're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I'm really made up for Springbank because they're very much ostracized from the rest of the whiskey industry. They're not members of the Scotch Whisky Association. They have been subject to criticism because of their way of working. There has been 1,001 attempts to buy Springbank by bigger whiskey companies, all of which get knocked back. And recently, the doyen, the patriarch of Springbank, Headley Wright, his name, passed away. He was in his 90s. But before he left the planet, he made sure that there was a triple locking system in place of committees to ensure that Springbank remains independent as a distillery, doing things the old school way. And I totally endorse Springbank, always have, because for Scotch whisky to hold on to its reputation, it needs to be distilleries producing best in class according to the resources. Because the more you have a corporate multinational producing whiskey vodka and relying on branding, the more you can simply remove the badge Scotch whisky and call it whiskyfromanywhere.com. What distilleries cannot do now is use inner staves within their casks. Because the Scotch Whisky Association have ruled that it's not traditional, which in my opinion is bullshit.
These guys got in trouble for Spice Tree, right? Was it Spice Tree that did that with?
It was Spice Tree that did it.
Yeah.
And they were said, no, you can't do that, despite the fact that it worked phenomenally well. And the French wine industry in particular have been using inner staves for centuries, because it's a great way of taking a moderate action cask and putting in wood flavour in the form of a thin stave. And you don't need much. I'll show you an inner stave. I've got one right here. This is it. That's an inner stave.
That's really thin.
Yeah, super thin.
Really, really thin and flexible.
Yeah.
This happens to be French oak. And it was designed for a French oak wine cask, a barrique, where the French wine industry want specific oak styles to be influencing their flavour of their wine. And this is where the Scotch whisky industry are buying in wine casks because of the lack of availability of ex-bourbon casks, because the bourbon makers are now selling them to the single malt makers in the USA. Or alternatively, the bourbon makers are setting up their own single malt whiskey distilleries.
Yeah.
So is that they keep hold of their own casks, because they all want to have the next Pappy Van Winkle. Yeah. Because of the owners of Pappy Van Winkle brand are now billionaires.
Well, that's never going to happen because, I mean, I don't think it will, because bourbon is so one-dimensional, and the fact that there's so
ouch.
many.
Ouch.
Oh yes,
The-
be prepared for our talks on bourbon.
Oh, we
ahead.
honestly, so there's so many craft bourbon makers out there that if in the next 5 years something doesn't happen with this economy, 50% of them will be gone.
There might never be another Pappy Van Winkle, just because like it just arose at a time where, you had Anthony Bourdain boasting about it. You had, one of the most predominant restaurant reviewers giving it 100 of 100, or someone gave it 100 of 100.
Samuel L. Jackson in Secret Invasion, in the new like series on Disney Plus, talks about Pappy 23 and how it's a $5,000 bottle.
Yeah, see, like you're not going to get that stuff anymore. I don't think you will.
No.
I haven't bought a Jura bottle in probably 7 years.
I never drink Jura. Never.
Yeah.
I don't even have a bottle of it. I don't have a bottle of it. Yeah.
I don't know who does. I don't know how they exist.
Well, they exist in the supermarkets.
Yeah, I guess.
And they get discounted during the summertime when the supermarket's struggling to put on a special offer. So they're letting the Isle of Jura single malt go for an absolute song. £22 a bottle, 40 Canadian dollars for 12-year-old Jura. It's pathetic. And when I bought a bottle to review, it actually was pretty decent. It was really quite decent stuff. But it's completely off people's radar because, in my opinion, of just the sheer entrenched, institutionalized incompetence of the owners, who just simply don't know how to make that whiskey distillery something special that it can be, because it shows in historic legacy bottlings.
But how's
from
that even
independent
possible?
bottlers.
How's that even possible that distilleries like this still exist? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me because it seems so logical to just do it the right way and get it done properly.
Well, there's markets that appeal to bottling a certain way.
But are there still is there like how many new drinkers are there regularly on like?
Well, I mean, we talked about Ben Romick before at 43% and chill filtered, right? But like, think about the markets that a lot of people buy that kind of whiskey in, right? Like, there's so many markets that people pour whiskey into a tumbler and put a couple cubes of ice in, and if they see it go cloudy, they're like, the whiskey isn't good. There's still that exists.
Yeah, no, you're right. It does exist.
Well, we're told that exists, but you will never ever find anyone, because I've asked, that said, I didn't want the whiskey because it went cloudy. This has been manufactured. This is manufactured historical legend from within the whiskey industry. And I'm going to give you an opinion, gentlemen, as to why they chill filter. Because in chill filtering, they remove the haze from the whiskey. The proteins, the long chain amino acids, the vegetable oils from the barley grain itself. They remove the mouthfeel, because when you remove the mouthfeel and some of the flavour through filtering from a bad whiskey, it tastes less bad. It's a way of dumbing down the delivery of the product when you have a bad whiskey. Bad whiskies always show themselves in the finish. That's the weakest point of any whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And when you chill filter, you remove the impact of the finish of the whiskey. And in bars, the reason the bar professionals very rarely want to serve you a straight whiskey unless you're in a proper whiskey bar. They want to give you the tumbler. They want to give you the ice. They want to give you the whiskey cocktail for a simple reason. You'll spend higher, you'll drink faster, and you'll order more. Yeah. It's all about the money.
That's true. You will drink that faster.
100%.
Yeah.
It's the typical pour and play.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's more palatable, right? You can
Yeah.
you can drink a cold whiskey faster than you can drink a room temperature whiskey.
Absolutely.
When
This
you
is-
drink a room temperature
I'm
whiskey,
thoroughly impressed in this whiskey right here. Like I actually haven't had a peat monster, and for $62, I wish it was
I
available.
think
at that
I
price.
think I got like a really old one on the shelf. I should bring it by and we can
We'll
compare.
do a old versus new.
Yeah, it's one of the first ones that ever came out.
The nice part about the rant, Ralphie, is that we don't technically have to review anything if we don't want to. We just kind of yap about whiskey related things.
Yeah.
Um,
Ralphie, thank you so much again.
it's been a blast.
Yeah, it's such an honor for us. So always great talking to you.
wonderful. You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me on.
The invitation is open, so anytime you ever feel like jumping on, you just let us know. And
Yeah, good luck on with the Oswas. I hope they go well. Got lots of viewers and
100% you guys will.
excited to watch it.
No doubt in my mind.
They're going to go well. I can't say very much about it. I can't give any spoilers or anything that looks like a spoiler, because that's the landscape. But it's going to be a great moment to lock the door, turn down the lights, put on the Oswas, and pour a wee flight of drams if you're a whiskey enthusiast, because it's going to be the third one. And at this point, it's pretty well established now. I'm enormously proud of it, as is Roy. And it's been a great way, actually, of just connecting and bringing together the diverse online whiskey community with something positive that everybody can relate to.
Yep.
Very nice. Hi, Ralphie.
All right,
Appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Take care.
I'm leaving you.
Good night.
Bye.